Good people, this is the Corsair One, probably one of my favorite Corsair products ever. And this is the new Corsair 2000D, an answer to the ever-growing popularity in ITX space, but they're going vertical, minimizing real estate on your desk, giving us 360 radiator support on the interior. But as you can see, size difference, maybe they missed the memo of trying to go really compact, because even on their website, you cannot even find the 2000D or any other ITX enclosure under the small form factor cases. I found that really bizarre, but also, to be honest, this isn't really small form factor. It's 25 liters in volume. And so I really hope the cooling pays off here, just because of the entire mesh exterior. I hope it's not too restrictive either. I feel like they're trying to catch up to the interest that Fractal Design has received with Terra, with the Ridge, anything from Lee & Lee in the ITX space, the Meshalicious, the new Dan case, for example. All that is awesome. And Corsair, I'm glad it's different, just because it's slightly bigger and it can do anything that your current GPU requires. And your CPU as well. That is the very important bit too. This is not a case review without doing the peel first. Okay. We do have 4 variations of this case. We have the white, we have the black, we have the RGB version, so included 3 slim RGB fans at the front with grills at the back, so that's going to be nicely protected from all the cables getting chewed by the fan. And also there's the version without fans, which is going to be slightly cheaper. But whoever put on that sticker over here, my goodness, it's not even. This one's fine, this one's fine, but the top one, bouncing around everywhere. Bouncing around because they probably heard about the new QX fan pricing. My gosh. Now for the price, I definitely think they went a little too bland on the enclosure exterior. Sure, you can see the fans, they peek through, but the rest of the mesh, for example, is kind of this cheap metal. There's plasticky bits and stuff. It doesn't feel anywhere near the premium quality that you should probably expect for something that's over $140. Just for the frame itself. And yeah, I wish maybe more materials, different textures on the exterior. This is too boring. Luckily, we have plenty of non-boring bits, so the I/O is easily accessible, dual USB-A's and a USB-C. Of course, it is an ITX motherboard support only, and here we can see that full vertical range, so an SFX or SFX-L power supply above the motherboard. Beside it, no riser cable necessary. We can do a triple slot, 365 length GPU. So that means any 2.5 slot GPU like my ROG Strix 3080 fits no problem. There's plenty of space there, but my 4080 and many other custom 4080s is just, it's too wide. This is 4 slots. So obviously when we align it, it's gonna stick out of the case, and so it won't fit. That's something to keep in mind. So while the length will allow for really long cards, the width does not. And above the motherboard, here we see that fan bracket that will support a 280 or a 360mm radiator. I don't recommend doing push-pull because there's not enough clearance on the interior, but still plenty of room for nice beefy fans in there. I mean, this new fan is something else, with regular and reverse models available to create that clean look without compromising the airflow direction. These bottom fans are set to intake, but look like the rest of the fans on the enclosure. It's brilliant. They cleverly daisy-chain with snap-on bridges, and all these bits cover up the uglies, so you never have to worry about the looks or the cable management, as it's just one cable. This is what the premium Dirge 30mm performance fan should look like, the new Phantix D30. Now, strangely, Corsair says there's only 90mm available for our CPU cooler height, which is far from the truth. I was able to mount my D12L Noctua cooler, which is 145mm in height, and look at how much extra room we have. I can still mount the fan bracket and close the side panel just fine. But you know what? At least when they say this case can mount 8 120mm fans, I believe them. So we have 3 at the front, 3 on our side radiator bracket / fan bracket, and 2 more at the back for additional GPU cooling. If you're using a 2-slot graphics card, you can still mount slim fans here, which I'm not doing, but it fits. The front bracket is non-removable, but at least the fan installation is done on the exterior and not on the interior. So, dodge the bullet there. Now, interestingly, the side panels can be swapped, so you can mount the right one on the left and vice versa, but that's not a good idea because only one side of the side panel has the little cutout for our top panel, and the notches. So if you go to mount it and something doesn't fit right now you can see it's flush right against the frame. But if we look at the bottom of another panel here, there are no notches for the top panel installation. So the top panel will not fit properly if you swap out accidentally the side panels. I do have a few concerns. So for example, we have this very poor dust filter on the GPU side. So removing it, look at how restrictive this whole space is. And the GPU, like the triple slot, would be right up against the metal mesh, which is not really good for airflow. Here you can see just how close we would get if we're using a full triple slot card. It'll be right up against this metal mesh. We do have these Velcro ties so that you can mount the power supply cable, because the power supply is facing up, and we do have this little extension. And this is how it will be mounted, using this 90-degree connector and these Velcros to secure this cable exit, because once you put the top panel, it only has a tiny little slit, so the cable only exits one way. And of course, because everything is facing down, this is another little issue with this case right here. I mean, good luck accessing any of your USB ports. The GPU is going to be right there. So that's another issue with the vertical mounting, with everything facing the bottom. For the RGB version, we do have a fan controller and an RGB controller, which is super nice. So you can just directly plug this in with the USB 2 connector into your motherboard for IEQ control and also RPM control directly. So that's kind of all taken care of. And we also have 3 additional ports on the hub. So if you want to plug in any of the fans from the AIO into it, all that can be controlled together. Storage wise, so we only have a single SSD bracket, which I find really, really strange. You can mount it slightly above, and also it can go in this position over here to like really hide the SSD away from this whole location. But otherwise, I feel like for this amount of storage, you know, 1 SSD is a little too little. One more thing, the power supply bracket can be removed. 2 screws from the top and 2 from the opposite side, but you don't need to. You can just simply slide the power supply this way, which I find super convenient. So installing all the cables is super accessible when it comes to rerouting things from behind the motherboard tray. Look at all these cable type points. Woohoo! This is going to be a very easy job to assemble. And as you can see, the whole system looks pretty decent. I would say you would definitely benefit from having flexible cables, but they're not necessary. You have lots of room above the motherboard, sorry, not the power supply tray, lots of space right in front of it until the motherboard, and everything seems to be well in order. These are the slim fans. You can see you can have lots of room there until the motherboard for regular fans. I have my 240 AIO routed here. When I do close the bracket though, I find it to be pressing against some things that I can't really reach to access and like reposition. So that's the only annoying thing. The GPU, this is a regular, very slim, low profile 2-slot card, and you can see how close it is to that side panel. And with dust filter in here, there's nothing going through. Oh boy. But the worst handling, hands down, has to be this bottom access for your DP cables, your USB cables. It's just so uncomfortable to reach, because every time you have to access any of those USB ports, there's just way too much work involved. So removing the bottom cover first for easy access, and then routing them through this hole over here, and then plugging them into the motherboard, and then making sure that you know, have this on the correct side, because it's not that easy to access that whole thing again. So it's got a few compromises in terms of handling, and just something you have to live with when it comes to vertical and the motherboard facing down. As for temperatures, using my standard ITX system, so we can do a comparison. The CPU is totally under control. You know, there's plenty of intake there, lots of exhaust with the 240 AIO, so perfectly fine without the filter at the back, with the also open side panels. You can see there's no restriction on the CPU cooling that way. And also at $140 just for the enclosure, I would say do that, because you can mount your own 120mm fans that are full width and not the slim ones just fine. But when we move on to the GPU cooling, that's when things get a little bit iffy, and we go from 2000D RGB airflow to 2000D RGB no flow. At stock configuration, the GPU is just way too hot. You can see 80 degrees. I mean, what the hell is going on? This is with the AIO in exhaust mode, which is supposed to remove a lot of that heat away from the GPU. And removing that one, where is it? Where's that stupid filter? Removing this filter alone drops our GPU temperatures by 5 degrees. That's not insignificant. And then opening up the rest of the side panels just shows you how restrictive and whatever is happening inside the case is for the GPU cooling. I mean, 13 degrees difference between the best performing ITX enclosure here for the GPU cooling and the latest from Corsair is just unacceptable. I will say that availability for 2000D is going to be absolutely not an issue, unlike it is an issue for so many popular and really high-end ITX enclosures like the C4SFX from DanCase. You cannot find that anywhere, but I will give you a suggestion. If you are going for a 360mm all-in-one cooler and you need to go for a slightly small form factor enclosure, choose the Asus 201 Prime. I mean, it's slightly bigger, but it still supports ITX and micro ATX motherboards, and we can do a 360 at the top. And if you're going for really, something ITX specific, I mean, the NR200, that's a classic. And there are plenty of things that amount to being very difficult to recommend the 2000D, horrible GPU cooling, the subpar build quality, like everything feels a little plasticky. I hate the little tabs on the side panels that you have to insert first. These front sections on the side panel bend way too easily, and you can just not realize, but you're mounting the side panel wrong, aside from maybe also not mounting it the correct way because of the top little pin mounts for the top panel. It's very clear that Corsair is just trying to move the 360s alongside the 2000D, and based on our conversation, the 360 AIOs sell much better than 240s or 280s, and that is clearly evident of why they're trying to go that vertical route, but unfortunately not really working with anything else that would contribute to slightly better temperatures overall as a balanced system. And of course, a 360 all-in-one cooler for a CPU, you're gonna get fantastic temperatures regardless of the enclosure, but GPU cooling, man, that's the next best important thing in the case, especially for an ITX case. Come on. All right, guys, I'm just really disappointed. Choose the DanCase C4SFX. It's better in every single way. And yeah, you'll be a happy camper. I'm Dmitry, and I'll talk to you in the next video.